Hello, this is T. West. Welcome to Afrosynergy, news and information on Africa and the African diaspora. Aryan Brotherhood of Texas and Mexican drug gangs working together.
Able from their cells in prisons, often in solitary confinement, to essentially direct a criminal empire that extends beyond the prison walls and out into the streets of our communities. What I mean by that largely is that they're running a very major methamphetamine distribution racket, and we're talking something that reaches the millions of dollars. That I think has really been the remarkable thing, how they are able to get their messages out via written codes, verbal codes, sometimes through the use of their wives, their girlfriends to get messages out. The fact is the leadership is by and large in prison and often locked down and yet able to direct these things.
So organization and money, but you say millions of dollars, that's the total worth of the organization?
Well, I think that's probably right. We're talking about a gang that has more than 1,000 members and probably a good deal more than that on the street as well. So, yes, I think we're talking a major methamphetamine racket here.
TG, there have been some reports tying the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas to D.A. McClellan's murder because in 2012 he helped secure a series of indictments against key members of the ABT. In December, following the indictments, the ABT made threats against Texas law enforcement. Earlier this week, CNN spoke to a former skinhead who went so far as to say that the killings aren't about ideologies but about money. Take a listen to this.
When the indictment happened, this isn't an ideology battle here. This was financial. They took away some of their drug mules. They took away people on the outside who were supplying them.
Now, you need to also realize that there are men and women in the Texas legislature who are actively seeking to have companies and individuals to move to Texas who are avid about gun control laws not being enacted. So Texas would become more and more a wild, wild west location.
TJ, do you agree with that? More about money than ideology?
I completely agree with Frank Meeks, who made that statement. The truth is, it is about ideology. It's not about ideology. It's about money. They use the swastika. They use the trappings of white supremacy. As Mark talked about, the coding system. Everything is used for financial gain. When you look back in December when they went after them in the racketeering case and got 34 indictments, that put a big hurt on them. And they don't like the loss of money. That's how they control, that's how they maintain. Every group underneath, and Mark can attest to this also, all skinhead, all Peckerwood subsets are basically their mules. They do their dirty work. So, you could have, this may not be an actual ABT member that may have done these murders. It could have been one of their satellite groups that this guy's trying to get in with them just to earn his mark or earn his respect, to earn his bones, to become a member.
It's always troubling when the bad guys kill the good guys.
It's very troubling. There have been 13 district attorneys killed since the 60s, since they started keeping count. 2, though, in a couple of months, and they are heroes. They are the line between order and disorder in our society. And in seeing the assassination of District Attorney McClellan and his deputy before that, Mr. Hassey, I thought of Buford Pusser, who tried to clean up West Tennessee,
sure.
and the Dixie mob and the State Line mob down there.
They made a movie out of it.
They made a movie, couple of movies out of it, and he lost his wife as a result. He was shot 8 times and stabbed as many times. Some suspicion is being cast on a group called the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. There is no evidence at this time linking them to this crime. But apparently Mr. McClellan had made a statement to the Associated Press prior to his death that they may have been responsible for the death of his deputy district attorney in Kaufman County, Texas.
And after the deputy DA was gunned down, this particular district attorney, who was murdered along with his wife on Saturday night, he made it very clear, we're going to go after you guys and we're going to find you.
Right, and the Texas State Department of Public Safety had put out a statement in December after the indictment of about 40 members of the Aryan Brotherhood in Texas in a federal and multi-district indictment that they may be subject to mass casualties. The Aryan Brotherhood was started in California in the 60s in response to the desegregation of prisons there. According to the FBI, they are only 1% of the prison population, but apparently account for 18% of prison murders.
Now, for some of you who like to throw around statistics, FBI statistics on murder, I want you to remember that statistic about what is happening in the prison system. 1% of the prison population, but yet responsible for 18% of the murders. And now it appears that they've linked up with the Mexican drug gangs, and they're killing people outside of the prison, attacking government officials.
They are involved in these cases. They're practically terrorists.
You talked about extremism. It's a form of terrorism. It's a form of imposing fear. We talked about it this morning, how people in that community are afraid, and the officials in that community are saying, well, no, you shouldn't be afraid because these people are targeted victims of whoever did it. They're also looking at any cases that Mr. McClellan and his deputy, Mr. Hasse, had worked on together, other than cases involving the Aryan Brotherhood. But we have the death of a corrections official in Colorado. The death of Mr. Hasse may have been the same man that killed them both. Looking hard at this, district attorneys across the country are very concerned, and we should all be concerned that the killers are brought to justice very, very soon.
Yeah, Mark, do we think of this as a nationwide group, or is it regional? How should we think about this group?
No, ABT is regional. I mean, it started in the Texas prisons. It has spread to some extent into prisons in neighboring states, but it's really about Texas. There's a common misconception that Aryan Brotherhood of Texas is a subset of Aryan Brotherhood, which is a great big national gang that started many years earlier in 1964 in San Quentin. So no, it's a regional gang, much like the gang that is being blamed in Colorado for the murder of the commissioner there, Tom Clements.
And their number one business is meth at the moment?
Yes, I think that's true. They also distribute heroin, cocaine, and marijuana to a smaller extent, but I think methamphetamine is the number one thing that they're doing.
Yes, now meth is a drug that is used predominantly by whites. But for a generation, the U.S. government cracked down very harshly on those who were selling crack cocaine, primarily blacks and then Mexicans. Now we have these white gangs that are now killing government law enforcement officials.
TJ, can you give us a scope of their business? You said that they have direct links to the Mexican drug cartels. How's that?
Well, I mean, inside the prison system, the main drug line comes from the Hispanic gangs. And all white supremacy gangs since the 1960s have had a very close allegiance with Hispanic gangs. That's how the whites get their drugs. They get it from the Hispanic gang members. And that's how they're able to distribute it out. So they do have connections with, especially along the border states, Arizona, California, Texas, New Mexico. They have those connections with the drug cartels. Between the heroin trade, the methamphetamine trade, which is huge for them, and the extortion. You come to jail and, John Gotti paid $60,000 to the Aryan Brotherhood to secure his existence while he was in prison. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Mark, according to the Anti-Defamation League, the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas has killed more Americans than any other domestic extremist group, with over 100 murders, 10 kidnappings. What is their ultimate goal, if there is one?
Well, their ultimate goal is to run a very lucrative criminal empire, and they have been rather successful at that. Most of those murders, or actually more than 100 murders that they've committed, are aimed at their own people or at members of other gangs. These are generally not simply innocent members of the public who are robbed or whatever it may be. These are people in the underworld.
This is T West with Afrosynergy.